I'm Ryan Supple. I'm a managing director with a private investment group called Graycliff Partners. We've got 2 private equity buyout funds and 1 private credit fund. Everything we do, for the most part, touches industrials, manufacturing, distribution. I'm entirely dedicated to the sourcing and origination effort. Word of mouth is still a very big deal. Business owners especially are talking with other business owners, and they can share, hey, we had a great experience with Graycliff, or we enjoyed it so much that now we continue to invest alongside of them. That goes a very long way.
Ryan, you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
I'd love to. Well, Reese, first of all, thanks for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to play with you as always here at Windy PGA in Frisco. I'm Ryan Supple. I'm a managing director with a private investment group called Graycliff Partners. We're headquartered in New York. We've got folks all over the country. I actually live in Louisville, Kentucky, believe it or not. Our roots date back about 35 years. Our group was originally part of a bank called HSBC Bank, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, dating back to the early 90s. We officially spun out as Graycliff Partners in about 2011 and started raising our own institutional funds at that time. And fast forward to now, we have kind of a three-pronged, three-leg of the stool strategy. We've got 2 private equity buyout funds and 1 private credit fund. So it's kind of neat. Under Graycliff umbrella as a whole, we can cover one side of the cap stack or the other, whether it makes sense for us to be a buyer from one of the equity funds or a lender from the credit fund. We have what we call a nuts and bolts, folks that make stuff or distribute stuff flavored to us. So everything we do, for the most part, touches industrials, manufacturing, distribution, almost entirely founder, family-owned focus. Every now and then we'll chase a deal that's been private equity owned, but historically it's not been how the model has set up. We've got 2 buyout funds, as I mentioned. Our small cap fund, which is relatively new, about 2 years old. We can go as small as about 2 of EBITDA with that one, up to about 5 or 6. That is the cutoff line, naturally, for the main fund. I think I mentioned we're on Fund 5, so the main equity fund is Graycliff Fund 5. It's about a $615 million fund, so we're squarely lower middle market, always have been, always will be. That fund, like I said, probably starts off around 6 or 7 of EBITDA. We can technically go as high as 45 or so. Neither of those would be normal. Yeah, so something, call it high single digits EBITDA to 25 or 30 EBITDA is right down the middle.
Spot.
Yeah, sweet spot. Like I said, primarily founder family owned. We are about, hopefully soon to be 4 platforms in on Fund 5. We closed 2 last year, handful of add-ons, and we had one that we thought could close last year. It's hopefully, knock on wood, should close in the next couple of weeks. So be a good way to start off Q1 of 2026, and that'll be the 4th platform deal done in Fund 5. So as always, big hopes, big deployment goals for this year. So we'll hit the road hard and see what we can dig up.
In all of your different strategies, when you have new deals coming in, how are y'all? What's your process for bucketing those into different places?
Yeah, sure. It's a good question. Within both of the equity funds, the focus is generally the same. So the how we decide which fund it goes to is essentially size. Like I said, it's all nuts and bolts, industrials, manufacturing, distribution.
Right.
So the focus
EBITDA size really is
EBITDA size for the most part is the only delineation between the Ascend fund and the main fund. The credit fund, the third strategy, is a much different ballgame because we're lenders. I would tell you that probably 95% of the deals that we're doing from the credit fund is supporting acquisition financing of other equity groups, right? So because of that, we're pretty much industry agnostic at the credit funds. They certainly like the same industries that the equity funds do. So we'll do industrials, manufacturing, distribution, but because they're more agnostic, it's much more of a cash flow game. We've done stuff around staffing, restaurant deals. They are partners in a phlebotomy practice right now.
I'm gonna have to Google what that is.
That's folks that draw blood. Pretty wide net that the credit fund casts. So it's mainly about relationships with the right equity groups.
Got it. On your credit strategy, do y'all ever participate in your own deals?
No, that's a great question. we keep them very segregated for a lot of reasons. But a good bit of that is classic just diversification strategy. But given what I mentioned earlier about us partnering with other private equity sponsors, the decision was made a very long time ago to keep them very
totally
separate. We want to make sure that when we partner with equity folks, they trust the credit side of the house to not share details of ongoing deals with the buyout side. So
Chinese walls.
That's right. That's exactly right. So yeah, for the most part on our equity deals, we're pretty conservative these days relative to others on the debt to equity ratio. We're using primarily senior, but in the instances where we do put junior, mezz debt on it, we use other folks, not our own. So we're one side of the cap stack or the other. We're either acquirers or we're lenders.
Got it.
Never both.
Makes sense.
Good question.
It's a good way to raise money around probably too.
Yeah, and since you mentioned that, they're three totally separate and dedicated strategies. They have their own LP bases, they have their own investment committees, their own deal teams. So we'll often get the question, what percentage of your fund, as in one fund, is equity versus credit, and that's not how it works at all. They're three separate funds and strategies.
Yeah. In terms of like your team structure and your people, how are y'all? We were talking about organizing and tracking, but like, how's your team structured? How many people do y'all have?
Yeah, we're still a relatively small team. I think we're up to about 28 folks now, give or take. We've just made, I guess, 2 new hires this year.
Nice.
One to the credit team, one to the Ascend, the small cap team. So yeah, relatively speaking, we're a small, nimble team. We've always liked the size of the deals that we do, the size of the team. The track record has been good, so there's been no material reason to change lanes to this point.
This might be duplicative, but to what we talked about earlier, do individuals focus on specific funds, or are you spreading yourself across kind of a handful?
Yes, we've also made a point over certainly the past several years to make folks focus on one fund or the other.
Dedicated,
These are dedicated deal teams to any of the three.
Got it.
The three funds. We used to have a couple folks that would work on both credit deals and equity deals, but these days, for the most part, folks are dedicated to one of the three funds and don't really move around much.
What about sourcing? Are you sourcing for your fund, or is there somebody sourcing for everything, and then it's kind of finding its
also
lane?
Good question. It's kind of a team effort. I'm entirely dedicated to the sourcing and origination effort. We've got one other guy that also is dedicated to that. The deal team guys spend some portion of time, depending on their bandwidth.
Yeah.
Right? Just naturally, they'll develop good relationships with industry bankers that we've worked with on specific deals, and so naturally they'll have ongoing dialogue for years. So everybody kind of pitches in, but we do have a couple of folks who are dedicated to the function. I spend 95% of my time sourcing deals for the equity funds, the buyout funds, but inevitably, someone will send us a deal and I'll say, hey, that's not a terrific fit for the buyout funds, but depending on, obviously a different ball game, but depending on who your lead horses are, our credit guys would love to throw their name in the hat. And a good percentage of the time that works. So, sometimes on the buyout side, we can get our credit side involved.
Plug them in if y'all are passing or not a good fit.
I mean, I can talk more about what I do specifically, on kind of the sourcing and the origination side. Everybody obviously is looking for an edge in how they find deals, and with the amount of dry powder that everybody talks about, and there are just many thousands of PE funds now that are all trying to do some version of the same thing. Right? So we've been layering in, more data-driven approaches for years now, and starting to layer in some AI stuff at a high level. We have several focus tiers that we're constantly auditing and reanalyzing, but the main focus is on a core 2 or 3 tiers that we have these intermediaries bucketed into, right? Remarkably, since 2020, all of the deals that we've closed, including add-ons, have come from about 20% of the folks that we cover, and that's why we keep, putting resources and effort and manpower behind these few focus areas. And it's, we've got enough data now after many years that it's reliable and it's good. It keeps getting better, but that's the overall premise and how we find the folks that we chase.
And are you saying when intermediaries being banks.
Yeah.
So that's the predominance of the flow is from banks. I mean, I know you said family founder, you might go direct.
Given the size ranges that I mentioned, the vast majority of the deals we chase, and we still get plenty of proprietary deals. I'm certainly not saying that. Historically, we've our track record with proprietary deals has been, I would say, above average. Word of mouth is still a very big deal. Where it's as much technology and AI and folks are laying in. It's still a relationship game, and at the end of the day, people like doing business with folks that they have a good time with and think they can trust. So word of mouth is a big deal for us. When business owners especially are talking with other business owners and they can share, hey, we had a great experience with Graycliff, or we enjoyed it so much that now we continue to invest alongside of them. That goes a very long way. It's certainly a tiebreaker at the very least. That trusted advisor network and business executive network is a great source of proprietary looks for us.
Let's move into the personal side since we covered the work stuff. Usually like to start with kind of your journey into the private equity role you're in now. Take me through the arc.
My journey, you could call it fairly unconventional. I didn't necessarily have the PE pedigree, so to speak. I went to University of Kentucky for undergrad, which is a good school, fun school, but not necessarily the financial powerhouse, I guess, of the SEC. Did finance and business there. Actually started off in commercial real estate, believe it or not, which was fun, but knew that wasn't necessarily for me. Made the decision to move to Chicago kind of right during the first financial crisis, the 08, 09, 2010 era. So I literally schlepped it around on the old school trading floors. So I was trading like futures on the on the Chicago Stock Exchange. Right? So hated it. Absolutely hated it. I knew about M&A and wanted to get into M&A, hopefully PE, but I didn't really have a direct path towards it. So decided to go to business school. I went to University of Chicago up there, which was good. So that was, that kind of got me on an even playing field, so to speak. And then got into to a family office. So I kind of cut my teeth at a family office in Chicago, which kind of got me excited to get into PE. Moved on to another family office based in St. Louis. We were successful. We did a handful of deals, and essentially that got me on the circuit to meet guys, to meet you and meet a bunch of bankers and PE guys that I'm close friends with to this day. So joined HKW, Hammond Kennedy Whitney, out of Indy, and was there for several years following the St. Louis family office. And then I joined Graycliff in January of 2020. So I was living in Kentucky at the time.
Oh wow!
And the plan was to be in New York, quite a bit the first year or so, but literally 3 weeks into joining, COVID would hit, and it was this new guy at this new fund, and we had a brand new fund to put to work. And we found a way to get it all deployed, and now we're here. One fund later, so kind of a meandering path in the PE world. I'm jealous of these guys who are young and have a much more paved path into that world, but there are plenty of ways to get there if you're open to kind of being gritty and putting your nose down.
Well, I'm sure you can't disregard anything you learned along the way, right? I'm sure that trading job, even though it was really hard, you probably picked up some things, even if it's what you don't want to
I'm grateful for all of it. You learn as much from what you don't want to do as what you do want to do.
100%.
So while I would have loved to get into this world 10 years earlier, I'm grateful to be in it now.
You just said you wouldn't change anything because you're grateful for it, but if you had advice to people that are entering in, maybe it's leaning into something you learned halfway through that you're oh, that would have been really good to know at the beginning of my entry into the industry.
I think anytime you can specialize, whether you like operations or whether you like a certain industry, right? So if you gravitate towards aerospace and defense, or if you gravitate towards healthcare, if you gravitate towards industrials, anytime that you can say, I know a lot about that industry, I think that the whole advice to younger guys has become a lot harder in the last few years with AI type stuff.
Sure.
So your mind goes to, how can I be less replaceable? Right?
Valuable, value add.
I mentioned earlier, even this industry, it's still a very relationship-driven kind of a thing. There are a ton of bankers, there are a ton of private equity guys. So, relationships still travel very, very well. Life is short in a lot of ways, but life is long in your work world, and, the M&A world is a very it's a small space, right?
Yeah.
So you're making good relationships and good friends that you can count on and kind of grow up with, right? So I'm not sure if that's fantastic advice, but the more you can become really good at something that you really like and make relationships in those spaces along the way. It's worked. It's paid dividends for me, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but if you're in it to help other people, I'll get a deal in that's definitely not right for Graycliff, but if I like it, I'll try to find a good home for it. So I'll make some calls and call friends in the industry and say, like, I'm aware of this. Is it up your alley? I'll connect the dots, and obviously it comes back around, but folks remember that and they appreciate it. So the more helpful you can be to everybody in your circle, the better.
You're not doing it for the like a quid pro quo thing. This similarly cheesy. Yesterday I told someone, I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm karma farming in a way.
Yeah.
Like I don't need anything in return, but with enough volume of like goodwill put out into the space, which is specialized for me, it's private equities, like the focus, it's gonna work out.
Right.
On a long scale and a long career kind of timeline.
Again, people do business with, life's too short. People do business with people that they like and they remember. And I'll get a call from somebody that I played golf with 4 years ago and say, I remember you said you like that, and you're the Kentucky guy. So be memorable. Just be a good person that folks like to hang out with. Don't be the first one to leave the bar. Don't be the last one to leave the bar, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fun, my man.
Very fun.
Thank you.